So we're going to start. Good evening to all, and thanks for coming. And thanks to the AA as well to allow the units to bring people that we think can contribute to the research and the discussion that we're doing in the units. And then the opportunity to share it with the rest of the school. And we as D5, we have invited Izaskun to be here tonight with us. I'm going to do a short introduction. Izaskun is a Spanish architect, but that's not remarkable. What is remarkable is that she's part of a very young generation of architects. Well, my generation, still very young. And in such a short period of time, she has been able to produce a quite remarkable body of work. And quite some success, actually. Something what is striking of her work is precisely that underpinning all the speculation that you're going to see, there is always a desire to change reality, to engage with the real world and to participate in the process of change that I think as architects we have that role. And so her work is there actually to challenge the established rules, and if anything, it embraces the values and responsibilities that our generation stand for, in the sense that ecology, for instance, is not anymore a response to a problem, but actually it's inbuilt in what we think, that we've been brought up with these ideas, and Izaskun is a clear example. As Deep 5, what we're looking in her work is consistency, basically. Even if the production of our unit and the stuff we do with our students is finally very different to what Izaskun does, we share the same basic idea, which is to operate through consistency, which is finally it's a pragmatic method, and it's a system that binds all elements that allow us to make architecture together and to be able to speculate, but at the same time they are grounded in material or with thinking or let's say the purpose is to be built. In the case of, well, we call these things internal and external consistency, and in the case of Izaskun it's more of a layered consistency. She manages to create a bunch of unconnected and multidisciplinary assumptions, always in different levels and at the same time, and she makes them fuse and they become nearly inevitable. And that's truly the originality in her work. I think that actually her work is quite relevant and very valuable. I hope you agree with me. So it's a pleasure to have Izaskun with us. Thanks.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the AA and especially for Luis View for inviting me here. Also, I would like to thank Belinda, Valerie, and Joel, the people who have helped me for being here and to have everything arranged. Secondly, I would like to apologize for my bad English. Then I will try to explain some projects. I will explain first a first project, and then we will go through the lecture title, which is to Unorthodox Laboratories. The first project I'm going to explain is the restocking, the artificial restocking of the Retiro Park in Madrid. As every restocking, it consists of simply including new trees in a territory. But this time, in this project, the trees are artificial ones. So they are samples of architecture. For the Retiro Park, which is an existing park in Madrid, the project follows these general intentions. First, make the Retiro a contemporary park, optimize the use, question that the ornament is the most important characteristic in that space, allow the influence of bad companies, highlight the marginal occupation in order to bring it as a space where uses and uses can mix, allow its former nighttime use, enable the enjoyment despite adverse climate conditions, improve the ecological and environmental qualities, modernize the infrastructures, and convert it into an efficient interface for consummate urbanites which can no longer read nature. So this project has two main parts. The first part is an invented competition for make the Retiro a contemporary park. The second part is the expeditions that the architect, author of the project, made to the Retiro Park while the supposed project was being made. In the first part, which is, as I have said, the fictitious competitions for making the Retiro a contemporary park, we have 6 panels. In the first panel, we have the development of the site plan generation and the settling strategies. The document, which is here, works as an equation, so the result of every row is taken into account in the next row. In each row, we are trying to deal with different parameters and exploring different techniques in relationship with architecture. The next row in the document, which is here, is talking about constituting parameters and is exploring the use of mathematical entities to control complex architectural problems. So first, we take into account the deficits of equipment, of public equipment. Then we take into account the beneficial effects that the trees usually have over the environment, and we build a point matrix putting in columns these benefits to the environment, and in rows the deficits of equipment that the tiles or the artificial trees were going to perform. Next row is talking about programmatic parameters. It's here. And the technique explored is the verifying of dumping of unusual programs in the territory. So to each point of the matrix, a functional program is assigned. And the program is decided by the intersection of these two conditions: the deficit equipment that it has to solve and the beneficial effect that it has to have over the environment. For example, if a tile has to perform a regulation of temperature or humidity level, and programmatically it has to be framed on a sport, it will be assigned a use of scuba diving school. The tiles are grouped into identity areas following 2 different criteria. The first criterion is the perceptive one, which means that areas which have a dominant sense are joined, and the second criteria is the social grouping one. That means that people going on couples, going on families, going on groups to the park are going to find a common area. So the importance of the location of the pre-existing conditions make a new order for these tiles. The result is a net lake of uses where identity areas are joined and certain uses of the pre-existing ambient of the park are joined also. We are looking for identity areas to have a spatial continuity. In the second row, we are trying to deal with the occupational parameters. The technique explored is the organization through densities as opposed to more formal or deterministic elements such as aces, frontage, plazas, or any others. This scheme shows the actual balance between occupied mass and open spaces in the existing park. This one deals with the idea of identity and conservation in the existing state of the park, and what we get by crossing both informations is an occupational differential density schemes with different areas. So the most round down areas are going to room much more tiles, like these ones, than the areas that are nowadays in good state. Next row is about configuration parameters. It tries to make a first location of points as GURMs for the new layout. So the first matrix of 70 points suffers a first transformation due to the irregularity of the perimeter, a second transformation due to the position, the location of the entries, and a third one to be coherent with the density schemes that we get in the previous row. The last row in this document is the descriptive parameters of the intervention, which tries to deal with the conformation and the content as an aspect review. The technique explored is the superimposition of guidelines and the mutual influence. So in this first scheme, what we see is that the new guidelines prevail over the old ones, or just the opposite, depending on the density assigned to each area. In the next scheme, we see how these artificial trees, these points, are joined in coherent paths through ground operations. And finally, we see a superimposed vision of different moments of the park with this location for artificial trees and the coherent paths making by changing the ground of the park. Forward. No. Yes. The second panel in this part is about the location plans in different phases, such as 2001, 2006, 2014, and 2022, and also the park's identity evolution scheme. So the whole intervention is supposed to disappear after 25 years. It's an ephemeral intervention. In these years, we are seeing this, in this scheme, how the identity areas are changing their character. So they have peaks and troughs, and the coincidence of peaks of different identity areas will change the general character of the park. For example, when family areas are on their peak, we are having a classical park, while where marginal uses are on their peak, we are having marginal kind of park. So what we can see is that the location and site plan of the park depends on the date. Next panel tries to deal with a detailed location plan following the identification of areas distribution, species distribution, and the process of aging in identity areas. So what we see here, rather than a physical description, is a synthetic image. Such image could show the superimposition of different information about the park. So we are seeing how the tiles are segregated in columns, reaching different environmental effects. We can see how the different identity areas are coherent, and we can also see in these kind of schemes how the identity areas suffers a process of aging. Next panel is the species board in which we can see all the species that have been designed for the park. There are 70, and the incipient configuration, which is on this board, is determined by two facts. One is the programmatic function, and the other one is the construction with traits that characterize each column into a different species. So the board reveals two relevant intervention strategies. One is the scale tree, and the other is the pointages structure. The scale tree refers to the fact that each element defines the scale by the surrounding elements. And the second characteristic, which is the pointages structure, is that spatial articulation is produced by the addition and neglects of different elements without a formal structural pattern. We can see the different tiles, the different artificial trees. We have here another version. Next panel is a section of the park showing the ground operations. So these artificial trees are joined in coherent paths through ground operations. Those operations have a shock and reversal character, so they are closer to installation than to architecture that tends to longevity. And the changing aspect of the operations over the ground relate them to seasonal rhythms of the park. For example, this one is quite clear. Here we can see the section. Next part of the project are the expedition proposed by the architect responsible of the project. Such expeditions are intended to ensure that the fundamental traits of the project are being achieved, as it is supposed that a multidisciplinary team should carry out the real project. So in each expedition, the architect is looking for a concept, which is in this column. And the expedition is made in different dates. So in first expedition, which is in this panel, the architect wonders, have natural energies been efficiently used so that the heating and cooling of outdoor spaces is cheap and its impact is low or insignificant. And in this expedition, the architect goes to a place which is supposed to heat or cool outdoor spaces. The operations consist on a calendar drawn on the floor. The calendar is composed by different fridges, each one dedicated to a month of the year. The months represented on the floor, on the ground, are those in which thermal comfort is not reached usually in Madrid City. And also, the hours of the day while the sun is shining are also recorded in these strips. A system of plain magnifying glasses and of shadow filters are superimposed to this calendar floor, so that in January, for example, the sun ray go through 10 magnifying glasses before arriving at the floor, while in May, for example, it just goes through 2 ones. So what we get is that in a precise point of the floor, due to this going through different magnifying glasses, we get the proper temperature for each moment of the year. The same operation is done with shadow filters. This is the section, the cross section of the pies. And so the calendar of the floor have been arranged with different materials that liberate heat with different speed. Some of them storage heat all over the day and allow heat radiation by night. Also, vegetation controls the wind flow and a dry garden is surrounding the place. In the second expedition, which have no general image, the question of the architect is: have functions been made compatible with the noisy environment, and have sound been understood as an architectural material to manage with? These operations consist on a sound belt treatment and is a piece in which different sound environments are arranged. So we have 2 footbridges to go through the park walking, and in one we can be in perfect silence, while in the other one we can just hear to the sound coming from the top of the trees, like singing birds, wind rumors, and all this. The development of this kind of very extremely light structure, supporting a special acoustic panels, such as absorbing, vibrating, or reflecting ones, carries out this kind of differentiation of environments in terms of sound. Also, the disposal of materials on the ground allow spaces, especially performance, for listening to the rain falling, or to just listening to distant sounds of the park. The location of the structure of the lace is due to the location of the existing trees in the park. Also, 2 other programs has been developed with the same technique. So we are seeing, these are the different cross sections of the lace. These 2 programs are a place for practicing aerobics with live music, and a place for the rehearsal of musical groups in the park. The whole thing also reduced the importance of the closed architecture, as the intervention is in the border, in one of the borders of the park. And this area, in the present moment, remains always a desert. The 2 conditions, or the 2 causes that we found, were one, the big noise around the area, and the other, the presence of this big architecture on the place. In the next expedition, the third travel, the architect tried to ask if vegetation become a building material, if the direct use of living materials have been encouraged in the project. And he is visiting a vegetarian restaurant where the main factor of design were, from foundations to detail, were the vegetation and its laws concerning to the growing. So the space under the construction is thought to be a paradise for roots, facilities to remove ground, to irrigate, strata filled with vegetal mats, allow mushrooms and other plants to grow spontaneously. In the indoors, the eating areas are developed over grass boxes. And also, different environments are separated by sunflowers and reed lines. The whole thing is covered by just plastic films, which are quite used in greenhouses in Spain. Vegetation is also used as a selective intelligent roof. Over the plastic film, some kinds of climbing species are growing, and the location of each species depend on the flowering and falling period, so that you can manage the quantity of light that is into the thing. This is the structure, and this is an aspect of the piece from the inside to the outside. Next trouble, the architect wonders which is the relationship between structures and environment, and how does a structure deal with the condition of dry building process, minimum weight, superficial foundations, easy taking down, and no voluminous transport. So lightness was an inevitable condition for the project. This this artificial tree is aimed to collect all the rubbish from litter bins and all pick up in refuse collector in the park. So the architecture here is organized around a conveyor belt, and this conveyor belt divided the whole piece into 3 areas. One is for workers, the other one is for visitors, and the other one is storage. So there is also a teaching and making aware intention taken into account, so that you make a kind of publicity of the recycling program. When each material arrange or reach the press, it is make a compact pack, and put out in these semi-transparent containers in the outside of the thing. So all the structure is developed with plaques of 5 millimeters of steel, and the geometry of the piece organized into bands of 3.5 meters wide allows extremely light construction. The whole piece, the main plants, are supported by this kind of nerves, which are made of the same material, 5 millimeters steel plant. This is the piece. So the width of the nerves is different depending on the loads that each area is supporting. This distribution allows a weight which is supposed to be 5 or 8 times smaller than the same made in concrete. This kind of supporting into wide bands of 3.5 meters wide allows the missing of another steel lay, as the twisting phenomenon are really, really low. Here we can see. Perfect. In the next travel, next expedition, the architect wonders if architecture is able to become a showcase of functional and environmental conditions as well as the trees are. Trees change their aspect depending on seasons, pollutions, dryness, ecological policies of the local governments, and so on. So looking at them, we can get an enormous amount of information. Not just about them, but about the surrounding environment. They are self-descriptions as well as efficient local descriptions. Emulating this condition was a good intention for this project. So in this expedition, we are trying to guess if this condition is reached. And The architect visit this area in which this pipe is aimed for being a climbing piece. So the purpose is allowing the practices of contemporary sports downtown. And what we see when we get to the place is this quite plain facade. And this is supposed for allowing climbing to expert things. If somebody which is not an expert, for example a child, come to the same place, he will find this kind of aspect which is quite an tangled one. So the differentiation between this form and this one, which is the same piece, allow you to know which is the skill of the people which is using the piece. And there are several different aspects. This is in the middle of the first two ones. Also, a lighting system allows sport to be practiced by night, and the same process of changing the information that you have about the piece is developed. A similar process happens to a different piece dedicated to experimental camping. For example, this is a winter day, a winter night, a spring windy day, summer day, hot summer day, great spring day, and great autumn day. Another great spring day. And this is here how a piece is exposed in different states, and the information that you get from the environment just seeing one of the states. Next travel, next expedition, deals or wonders if the utilization of environmental energy managed to reach energetic autonomy from the provided infrastructure. So the average way of using energy, which is taking it from the net, the public net, using it and creating another net for taking out what is a residue, was supposed to be quite inefficient. Also, there were no installations on the part using environmental energy. So what the architect found in this expedition is that some rings have been developed so that the location of different devices and aerial infrastructures allow the energy to be taken from the place, using in the place, and eliminate the residue. For this purpose, different devices have been developed. For example, this is a resting area in which also the function of taking energy from the environment is taken into account. And this function is the main fact of design. So the facade and the aspect is due to this. And also, many different devices have to be developed for allowing the direct absorption of hot light water from the place and the proper management, storage, consumption, purification, recycle, control. So you have to have collectors, deposits, consumption terminals, purificators, and also quality control elements. So we also developed this kind of expression meters, which were devices trying to point out a spontaneous process that are in the environment which usually you ignore. So in this process, these two women are seeing this thing. It is getting bigger, and in a certain moment a clock is ringing, and what happens is that the two of them put in this. And what is pointing out is the spontaneous heating of air in the environment. In this same way, the next expedition is wondering, does the final project make understandable the working of energy consumption so that the public become aware of the expenditure and potential saving, the waste and the impact that the energy use provokes. So the efficiency of the energy installation of the park depends as well on the real saving and as on the capacity of the whole project to make the public see the energy as a worthy heterogeneous treasure. So every treasure needs a guardian, and this is the guardian for the purity of rainwater. So in this piece, we have this funnel which is taking rainwater and putting it into an underground storage. But a little sample of rainwater is put in the middle of these two layers of glass, which is forming this bell. We will see what happens afterwards. Also is a place for resting when it's raining, and you have two sofas. One is a grass sofa, which is in the middle of the stream flow airs in summer, with these holes open so that all the flows reach this sofa. In winter, the holes are closed, so the cool sofa is in the middle of the hot stream. And what happens with this sample of water, of rainwater, taken into these two layers, is that if any pollution is in the rainwater, the chemical substance that is in this space make a very hard reaction. So if the water is polluted with ammonium, it becomes green, or if the water is polluted with another substance, is colored with other kind of color. So, next expedition is about prefabrication. The question is if some requirements of the project, such as dry building process, easy transport, and taking down unknown voluminous elements, indicate that prefabrication is a good method, but how have formal and dimensional flexibility as well as landscape agreement been achieved by precast elements? Well, the architect found that a prefabricated system has been developed, and these pieces were made of a mold by pouring different melted materials. So the goal is allowing any tridimensional curve to be formed by the triangulation process. So this kind of structure allows to build any form. Most of the elements are made of sophisticated but cheap ceramics, and the composition of the melted substance made it possible to control weight, toughness, color, and transparency of each of these elements. This system is especially suitable for the use of nudist sauna, which is the use of this piece, as it allows semi-hiding activities and perfectly assume the thermal impacts. This is the aspect of the whole thing. Also, the chromatic treatment was especially interesting as it provokes a kind of visualization of the park scenario. Also, brilliant and matte pieces provoke different reactions depending on the light that comes from the sky. In this expedition, and without having any monumental intention, the architect wonders if the architecture elements and the gardening treatments have the capacity of being urban and landscape reference. The architect decides that postcards is a good method to measure whether something is a popular reference for a city or a territory. So what he did is asking some friends to send his postcards, and these are some of the ones that are in his letterbox. He is comparing these postcards with the previous one of the park, which were always pointing out the semi-historical or pseudo-historical conditions. And this is a new contemporary catalogue, which is supposed to have provoked a certain change in people's imagination. Also, he found interesting the fact that none of the postcards were similar. And afterwards, he finds out that there are some facilities in the park for printing the image that you prefer. Next expedition, the question is, with special attention to joints, do they make the building calendar compatible with the function, and are the pieces built so that they don't leave any signs after being taken down? So, in this series of, in this kind of drawings, we are trying to make a reflection about how organize a building process so that in each day you reach a full state, so that the park is not closed to the public at any time. Also, every element have to be able to take down easily. So everything is a screw, no solder, and so on. This piece is a short, long period hotel, and the structure is mostly an scaffolding in which you can find a pack for the setting up of your own room. The joining system has more to do with camping tents than with usual architectural ones. So the solder joints have been replaced by screw-in joints, nuts, bows, and so on. This is the instructions book for the installation of your room. And the nice thing about it is that in this direction we are seeing the construction of the room. But at the end, if I play the whole sequence in the opposite way, we could see the taking down process, as any joint is not a definitive one. So it's a reversible process of building. So there were several more expeditions, some of them intended to collect all the press releases and well, some more of them which are not going to talk about. I would like to explain now the title of the lecture, but for that purpose I will need that somebody who had never been to Madrid City answer these questions. Is there anybody in the room that had never been to Madrid City? Well, the person have to be able to understand my poor English also. So somebody that have not been to Madrid City and that have understood what I have told for the project. Well, the purpose is that I want these people, or these people that have not been in Madrid City, to answer this question. For your understanding, which is the size of the Retiro Park? Bigger than a block or smaller than a block? Obviously, it's bigger than a block. I'm going to make the paper of the role of this person. Which is the position of the Retiro Park in the city? Is in the center of the city or is outside the city? So it's obviously in the center of the city. I hope that all of you coincide with me in this, agree with me in these answers. And which is the historical importance of the park? Is a new park without tradition, or it is a collage of different periods of history? Obviously, it's B. It's a collage of different periods of history. So what is funny about this project is that without having any intention of describing the place, as I have not make any reference to the park, I have not explained the position in the city, I have not explained the size. The whole project make an efficient description of what the park is. So these agree with some definitions of a laboratory, in the sense that, first of all, situations, proposals, and tools are constructed. Nothing is supposed to exist a priori. Even the field is not supposed to exist, but by the development of different relationships we intended, which are the field conditions. Secondly, the laboratory consists on a place where items from reality are translating into new specific terms. For example, artificial trees, for example, identity areas, for example, expeditions, for example, the role of the architect. And finally, the project, as we have been able to realize, is interesting as for being a description of the existing reality as for being a self-description of the project. So what I find out from this project is that I have built a kind of laboratory. And in the next two projects, what we are going to see is the transition from this first laboratory, in which laboratory is a place of working and is a tool mainly, to a kind of laboratory in which the user is the one making experiments and not the architect. So the transition is characterized by these two different phases: the isolation of factors and the transformation into visible material facts, the training and domestication of facts, the reproduction of variety, which is in reality, and the project begins after this isolation of factors, begin to provoke a certain reconstruction. Next project is a competition for houses in the city of Aomori in Japan, which is in the north of Japan. Maybe there are more people that have been in Aomori than in Madrid here. It's a place in which you have like 3 meters of snow for 6 months each winter. So in this project we deal with the idea of weather mythology. Interpreting causes and consequences of a storm has been the origin for a huge amount of different mythology. As a natural phenomenon, these events have been considered either as an unequivocal sign of punishment or a set of clues of a benefying attitude from nature or its managers. In cities like Aomori, where snowstorms become the veil of daily scenario, architecture intended to contribute to the positive appreciation of the event. Architecture transformed the plentiful snowfalls into its aesthetical object of desire. It builds a celebration of weather. So frost in a window in winter morning is the pattern for plants and site aspirations. Private little spaces will be as a whole a mass of snowflakes detained on the middle of the air. This is the first model made for the proposal. Is obviously made with ice. So in that sense, I was feeling very close to the work of a Spanish artist called Joan Fontcuberta, who is making projects about life with a sign and nature. In this project, he located different cars that had been crushed by ice elements, pretending that these ice blocks have fallen down from heaven. This is him pretending that he is part of the Spanish Meteorological Center staff. This is a big issue because it was in every newspaper and news on TV in Spain. So we were trying to do something similar to this kind of life. Also, the site to be built has to be understood as an intensively urban one due to its scale. This is the place. So the main elements, the generating elements, should be analyzed as a piece of city. So sparse places become streets, roofs provide the town with big sport equipment, and in the proposal, private and public categories are both understood as pieces of city, and they are deeply mixed up. This is the other side of the place. Also, in relationship with these two urban scales, which are mixed up in the site, we developed two kinds of scales in relationship with nature. One is the close scale of nature, which includes the accident, so is the risk scale, and the other one is the far away scale, which is supposed to deal with nature in a relationship of control. We want the project to make an evolution between these two scales. So we develop this kind of sections in which public facilities are located in 4 different positions. On the roof, you can have big sport equipment facilities for skiing, snowboard, or snow jump. On the ground level, we developed 12 new streets for the city, each one dedicated to a winter tree. And in the boundaries of this street, protected from the air and with no accumulated snow, we have a lot of shops, cafes, and so on. Some other facilities, bigger ones, are included in the project as if they were mineral fragments in the housing net. This is the roof plan of the project. Every single design decision has paid attention to ecological requirements and support. For example, this distance between different pods, which I will explain later on, is due to the path of wind through these areas. So, in one house, in one dwelling, we can see how in winter the indoor temperature will rise due to the development of these extensive heating elements composed by two layers of glass with 70 centimeters in the middle of both. The most sensible or the most sensitive living facilities such as a resting room and bathroom have been encapsulated into this kind of pods, which have a very big heat inertia. In the rest of the house, you have to display this kind of materials in order to control the wind flows. So in winter, it is supposed that no wind flow will go through your window, while in summer, every material will let wind go through. The choice of materials and building methods demonstrate that the difference between high and low technology does no longer make sense. Glass still live together with wicker cloths, carpets, and sunshades. Contemporary habits require new values for domestic architecture: flexibility, capacity of change, possibility to customize, new understanding of intimacy in and out of the family unit, alternative periods of welfare and contingency. These conditions is supposed to be accepted by dwelling without deep transformation of the traditional rituals. So the fact that that is why we have called this house the naked houses. Not only because we provide the essential, but also because keep them nude will be suspicious some way. So the basic park support, which consists in hygienic facilities, isolation, light, installations, and a warm place to sleep, has to be occupied and completed, interpreting, dressing, and redefining the meaning of the verb to inhabit. The fact that all installations are contained in these glass chambers allow a quick change due to the technological requirements. So the naked houses seems connected interfaces that are waiting for receiving new information. Besides, a huge amount of typologies are developed. For example, the depth of the house could depend on the amount of space for people working at home. The number of pots depends on the arrangement that you have in the family unit. And the whole thing allows very, very different kinds of living in the inside. A new social cause is proclaimed, and it's a chance for reconsidering the contemporary needs. Does a man who works so far need a kitchen? Do we need all an enormous multimedia equipment, or things can be shared? These were also themes talking about how you can share or rent common facilities, which are considered usually to be private. So, in that sense, on the contrast with the intimacy of the pods, the outer spaces allow people to decide how and to what extent they want to share their commodities with the rest of the neighborhood. And in this sense, we call these houses houses for a warm winter. Next project, which is also in this transition into both laboratories, is also a competition for a sportive pavilion in a university in Madrid City. So, somehow all the intentions were turning around the idea of exploding a very obvious simplified program into a third time more ambiguous and real object. So a pragmatic and very simplified have to be transformed into a complex one. This topic established a relationship with the work of René Magritte, and I have some sentences from Magritte which could be the memory of the project. Magritte said, "People usually tend to reduce through a game of thoughts what is strange to what is familiar. I make a big effort to restitute the familiar aspect to what seems strange." Another sentence is, "Mystery is not a chance of reality. Mystery is the only thing that is absolutely necessary for reality to exist." And this is a sentence from Foucault talking about René Magritte's work, and he said, "In this way, the calligram pretends that it will erase all the oppositions of our alphabetic civilization, to show and to name, to figure and to say, to imitate and to mean, to look and to read. And now it seems to me that Magritte drawing is made with pieces of a broken calligram." So, in that moment, we remember the student's habit of referring everything by a nickname. And what we decided was to design the proposal so that it could have a maximum amount of nicknames. This is a familiar sense of ambiguity. So we made several models, showed them to people, asking for as many nicknames as they could find, and just choose the form that have accumulated more nicknames. We multiplied the number of nicknames for the people visiting the university. And what we finally have is 30,000 registering names. And this was our slogan in the competition. So this was in the memory of the project, and it says 30,000 names have been registered for this sportive pavilion, taken from the collective interpretation. It's not necessary to say that some people will look at the project as if they were seeing a rugby ball, but they will lately realize that it breaks as a fits, gills included. For its simulation of water cycle, it will deserve the consideration of a cloud insistently adhered to mud. As it is slightly perched, it might be blue with an UFO. Its precise working shall allow him to be called future machine. Its oblique curve view transformed it for a second into a gigantic insect. However, someone discovering the indoors will say that he feels as diving into a oyster. Our spectator, fed by TV, will have a short of view of this superimposed image collage. He will stand at some distance as a man in front of a jukebox. This full of designs will be turning, and he will alternatively watch a strawberry, a pear, or a melon. He desires that three similar drawings coincide. But as possibilities are very few, the most probable thing is that we leave the place with just some luminous intermittences in his mind. So we are trying to have a similar interpretation of our architecture. So what we are basically trying to do is, in this project, is to multiply the choices and decisions that the user might make. He must firstly choose a name, an interpretation, and well, this will drive us later on to the second laboratory. And finally, we are dealing with an extensive meaning of program in which program categories are wider and redefined. For example, in the outdoors, the transformation from this plain space to the groove space also enlarge the number of decisions you can have, as it is a measure space, games and practice sport are encouraged. The position of the pavilion in the site is that which provoke a maximum amount and variety of possibilities in terms of shadow, wind exposition, and humidity. We define the creation of this environmental difference as generative functions. These are the differentiation between different conditions of the site. We also develop some emulating, managing, and choosing conditions. The emulating functions deals with the idea of reproducing some natural cycles in the place. And the managing functions transform the managers of the building into men with capacity of choosing closer to a ship captain than to the director of an inner object. So the director of the university could be criticized, maybe because he even not realized that these guilds have to be open in summer. So he some way is recovering his political functions farther than his just bureaucrat role. These are all devices thought to make managing decisions. Also, for the average user, we have developed some devices to customize the program. For example, these gigantic sofas allow them to watch sport with at least 3 different attitudes. Lying as if you were watching TV at home, sitting as if you were this kind of parents that have the compulsory habit of going to every matches that their children plays, or standing as the real sport fanatic. Optimistically, we thought that the building could be a kind of sheet in the change of environment. And we also make hard work about materials and details, allowing elements to materialize and easily speak of their emulating, managing, and choosing functions, giving the responsibility of being an effective self-descriptions. These are all the elements. It's a process of undressing of the building. These are all the office area, the structure of the office area, the main space for playing sports, the gigantic sofas. These are the resting rooms, which are hanging from the structure, and these are holes for having the airflows in the inside. These are the gills. In this cross section, we can see also that there is a kind of closeness with landscape. And finally, we have the average plans and cross sections and all these kind of things. And the last project I'm going to explain is another proposal for a competition, is the proposal for Tomihiro Museum, also in Japan. There is something about Japan attractive for the last year. And it was a quite a strange proposal, not because of our work, but because of the proposal, because Tomohiro was a dubious artist, because his water paintings with points are not very well contemporary, and I don't know why he's so successful. But at the end, we have this existing museum, and people were asked, architects of the world were asked to make a really, really big one for this work of Tomohiro. But something that was interesting is that the museum was in the place where Tomohiro inspired his artwork. So this is the natural environment we see, which is obviously extremely rich, and the watercolors were representing little plants and vegetation from this space. So what we wanted to do is more like a museum in which the user is observing art. We want to transform the user into somebody which is trying to discover a relationship between what is happening in reality and what is happening in the represented reality. So discovering and observing are not always synonyms, and making a museum with this aim of discovering is quite different. So we no longer desire to preserve things of the environment as they are, but the aim was revealing the functioning of flows that frequently are unseen by first glance. So the proposal conceived for this context is based on the idea of an intentional interaction. In this document, which is, I think, the most accurate document of the project, we can see how all the occasions for interactions has been planned, and also the occasions for having a sharing interactions. So in this moment, we display the idea of formats for interaction. So for each occasion of interaction, an element, which is a format for allowing interaction, has been developed. So the material elements that are normally involved in the functioning of a museum has been reviewed according to this objective. The entrance tickets, the safety barriers, the internal circuits of video cameras, the walking paths, the surrounding walls, the areas where option and criticism are expressed, the souvenirs, and others have been reviewed for this idea of interaction. For example, the entrance ticket has been transformed into a encapsulated seat disposal. The seats are the ones for the plants that Tomohiro make in these watercolors, and the watercolors have been used to distinguish the species of each seed. So if usually what you can do with your entrance ticket is just keep it or throw it away when it is used, with this ticket you can make an incredible amount, quantity of things. So the visitor should use the seed contained in the entrance ticket with a personal intention. He might plant the seeds in a varied number of positions, and in such activity he could be looking for a specific chromatic combination. He might be even more ambiguous, and in the context of interaction with other visitors, he could carry out big plantations, making rows, streets, parterres, rings, boundaries. In this way, the visitor has the opportunity to participate in the construction of the site setting. Another important fact was the relationship between the real and the represented. So we developed 3 different video circuits using this kind of security video circuits, which make a relationship between the real and the represented. So these are the main three rooms of the museum, and each one is connected with the reality with a video circuit. The first room is connected with the plants and vegetation that previous visitors have acquired and which are in their houses and are joined with the museum via webcam. The second room is joined with reality, with the real natural environment in which these real plants have been planted by previous visitors or are spontaneously grown. And the third room makes a relationship between the drawings and the upper plan, the access floor, in which you have a kind of greenhouses where every visitor is invited to plant a seed from his entrance ticket. Also, a kind of sequence for perceptive acclimatization have been developed, as the work of Tomohiro is really full of details, and it would be sad not realizing all these details. So we made a sequence based on the adaptation for the human eyes to a dark environment. In the first room, the expositors for the drawings were on the ground and were very loud, so that you have to bend over the earth in order to see the details of the drawings. The carpets were of just 2 greens, representing a spot of grass seen for a long distance. The video cameras, as I have told, join you with these extremely distant plants which are in the houses of previous visitors. In the second room, this kind of expositor allows you to put up the drawing and having it closer, being able to realize more comfortable, in a more comfortable bodily posture, the richness of detail. The carpet is also richer in color, so that you are like getting closer to grass. The video cameras are showing you what is in the surrounding of the museum, and in the third room, the expositors allow you to see the drawings at the height of your eyes. The grass is really complex in texture, and the connection is with the upper part in the access floor, from which you may have a memory. So, lightness was also a kind of ideological posture for this project and informs all the project. Lightness arises as a basic tool for the caring of the environment. A light proposal is always consistent with the minimization of both consumption of material and impact over nature. We claim for a fragmented construction in which big pieces are not used and none of the joints are definitive. Such architecture foresees a pacific extinction. It vanishes, leads no truth to territory. Lightness and fragmentation act by addition. They overlap each other, requiring heterogeneous construction to achieve efficiency. The result is that of a bare nest with an endless amount of breaches. Rather than search for an emblematic image, our architectural intention is oriented to the combination of little objects that are both usable by the visitor and changeable by nature. We defend ecological anti-monumentality. We give way to an architecture of 1,000 little beauties, those emerging from situations fragmented by light, material, and small shapes. Also, another topic for the project was the utilization of residual autochthonous material. Well, the use of materials from the place is like a big topic for architecture. In fact, from international style, it seems that the best accepted differentiation between archetypes are those justified by the use of autochthonous materials. However quanted this idea might sound, we propose a use not just of what we find in the place, and going further, we propose the use of what is residual in the place. So the pillars that are specifically supporting compression require a massive material of massive nature. For such purpose, remaining stone, sand, wood, water from the place and from the area are arranged so that no new stone or new tree have to be taken from nature. So we can see all the elements make as a patchwork with little pieces that are usually not useful for architecture. Another topic for the project was that architecture should be constructed rather with actions than with words. So if you ask people whether they build architecture in their daily life, they will probably answer in the negative. But if you ask me or other architects the same, we will say that everybody is making architecture in their daily life. So I will say that people create architecture when they open an umbrella. People queuing create architecture. Those who take a place where to go sunbathing create architecture. The rain is creating architecture when it flows a certain area. Those who grow plants in their home create architecture. And a person who hangs clothes in a place in which they can be seen is creating architecture. Another topic was marking and furniture, because the success of the described concept of architecture, that on action, lightness, and interaction, depend on two huge issues of design: furniture and marking. The specific nature of each described spaces will rely upon the use of furniture consistent with diversity of movements and adjustments and changes in use. The entrance level, which is this one, is an illustrative value for this regard. This part of the building is understood as a complex of channels and paths that permit the performance of planned acts and diversity and changeable acts. The introduction of the program in these channels is accomplished through the development of new positions of the furniture. These are different movable elements. This is a lower plan in which the aim is mostly similar. And also, an intelligent marking will guide the user in the outside. So an outdoor furniture will also be addressed, and the basic components for this outdoors furniture will be flower pots, movable parterres, planting areas. All of them are susceptible of variation. So the whole thing will result an outdoor space capable of adjusting to circumstances such as changes in the program or in the amount of visitors. And the outdoor setting will be something created by the audience. So the architect left deliberately unfinished the place and nevertheless speculate about the possibilities of change. So the rationale under this philosophy is to create a sense of responsibility in the audience, meaning that the state of such setting depends on the visitor's performance. So this drives us to the second laboratory, in which the laboratory is offered to the user, so the user can make experiments in the laboratory. So the message to the user is, we are ready to display all your interests through your methods and practice so that we can use them to reach your own goals. So what we get in this second laboratory is the dissolution of the analyze and proposal dichotomy, the translation, transfer, displacements, and inscription as the proper tools of both reality description and project activity. We finally believe that projects and architecture has the possibility of modifying big scales as they are provoking, displacing in some important actors. And this is the end of the lecture. You can make questions if you want, and just for ending, as you are going out of the room, I will play a little animation of the two projects I'm making at the moment, which are supposed to be built in few time. Thank you very much.
If anybody wants to make a question, or you prefer to watch the images. Prefieren las imágenes. ¿Sí?
Se han enganchado, ya no quieren. Es que además van a toda hostia. And that's all. Thank you.
Gracias.